Carriacou for me still remains my home. My old man had considered that that was a sort of rum talk. Is when people get together and they drink the old rum and they start talking a load of rubbish. Don't eat from people, they get a chance to get to your system.
So, what's your name?
Right. My name is Carlyle Calder.
Mhm. And where in Carriacou were you born?
I was born in Bel Air Hospital in Carriacou
Mhm.
on the 6th of February 1957.
So, what did your parents do? Who were your parents?
My parents are David Fortune Calder and Margaret Dulcina Kojo, who were staunch Seventh day Adventists. So, questions that you ask me later will be quite interesting because they'd made a decision to avoid a lot of this, as the old man would put it down, this rum talk. Put it that way. Mm,
So,
no.
tell me a bit about your parents then.
My parents, my dad was born in 1917. He, it was his second marriage. My mother was his second wife. And, well, the British government came down to the Caribbean and invited a lot of Caribbean people to come to the mother country to build the mother country after the war. But my father was doing all right for himself in Carriacou, but decided, all right, I'll give it a couple of years. I'll come over and I'll do a bit of work, send some money back home, and then in 2 years' time I'll go back and enjoy the benefits of whatever had happened in the Caribbean. But the reality wasn't what the plan didn't turn to reality.
What was your dad doing in Carriacou exactly?
Well, he used to build roads. He was a road driver. He used to lay the tarmac around the islands, and he used to employ a lot of people out there. Actually, there's a lot of stories surrounding that sort of thing that it's not suitable for me to talk about. But he, um, he done quite well for himself. He was doing quite well for himself, put it that way. And then he became a Seventh Day Adventist Christian.
So, how did you meet your mum?
Um, the meeting, I'm not too sure actually. I'm not too sure. There are different ideas as to how they met, but he was married before. The wife had died in childbirth, and I think it was slightly before he became a Seventh Adventist. In fact, I think the influences of the Seventh Adventist religion came through my mum, and she kind of vetted him. Thought, is he up to scratch? Yeah, go on. Then he's a good man. Along comes eight of us. Yeah, go on.
Oh, brilliant. Excellent. So, what was life like when you were young?
Well, my story is a lot different to others because I actually left Carriacou age 4. Yeah, and some of those little things that I remembered when I went back in 1980, just after my father died. I went back to Carriacou to sort out some of his business. And when I got back, there's little areas that I'm walking around. I'm thinking, I remember this, but I'm thinking I was only 4 years old. How could I possibly have remembered this? And in the one house in where my father's place was, I'm walking past it, and I thought, yeah, I'm sure it's unoccupied now. So I've gone in there and just fooling about and opened the cupboard drawer, and the book with his name is in the top drawer. It's disused. It was disused. A single story property, and just to check that it was right, I opened the drawer, saw this book, looked at it. It says the property of David Calder, and I thought, all right, right, okay, okay. But I didn't have enough time to really get into the Carriacou ways. Yeah. Um, 4 years old, we came over to Birmingham. It was in West Bromwich initially. So and that's when life started to move on.
Can you remember the journey from Carriacou
All I
to?
know, it took 3 weeks, and we ended up in London, at the docks in London. 3 weeks travel across the Caribbean to get here. We had fun. I'm told we had fun on the ship coming here, which is quite interesting, really, now because all these years later, and I've discovered cruising, and I'm thinking, I've been here before. I've been here before in a previous life. I just love it, absolutely love it.
Can you remember the name of the ship? Were you
Oh,
told?
I'm going to let you down there because you were talking about that the other day, and somebody had actually told me what the name of the ship was. It's not that I remembered it; somebody sort of prompted my memory and said, "So it was." We'd come across and had a good time in our travels. Yeah.
Oh, wow, okay. So let me see. Let me see. So you've talked about your earliest memories of
Mm,
Carriacou, really.
mm.
And so, what do you remember about the food, the people, the atmosphere? Can you remember anything?
Well, what I know is that Mum was always into cooking fresh. She wouldn't. She'd have hated modern day living because you just go down the road and you pick up some takeaway. She wasn't into that. And even in a lot of friends' parties that we'd go to, Mum would get up quite early in the morning and start cooking. So, what you cooking for? We're going to a party. She don't. She never liked people eating outside. Certain people you could be with, Aunt Iris and Uncle Isaac and all that we could go to, and she's all right with that. But she just had this thing, and as I talk about that to other Caribbean people, it seems like a lot of Caribbean people had that sort of thing. Don't eat from people, they get a chance to get to your system, like, I'm thinking, what do you mean by that? She'd have a nightmare in this modern day. Yeah. In fact, a story I have to tell is that in back in 1976, when I met Angie, my current wife, and we used to go into Birmingham city centre, and we used to do some shopping. Now, I don't like shopping. I'm not a shopper. My father told me I wouldn't like it because he used to spend too much time shopping with mom. But what Angie used to do, we used to go and we'd go and buy all the things that we needed that when we were together, like, and then we'll have a break, and then she will deliberately then go to, if I need a pair of trousers or a shirt or a pair of shoes, save that till later, till I get fed up. She'll save that till later. And for me, I'll just go into town and just buy what I want and get out. I don't spend much time in town. But the first section, where we're buying all these other things, we'd then stop and we go to Little Woods in Birmingham, and we go in the cafeteria and we'd pick up some chicken, pick up some cauliflower, pick up some broccoli, we'd do this, that, next. And I remember sitting down and saying to her, you know, if my mum was about now, she'd go absolutely crazy. What are you doing eating people food? You mustn't eat food from people. So what mum believed in is the get up there, get a pot on every day, well, as often as she could. And the old man, he was a dab hand in the kitchen as well, but you didn't see that unless he was in the mood. And he used to turn out some lovely cuckoo and okra, and um, we used to have the bun tea. We used to, um, the chicken, the fish. There was being Seventh Day Adventist. There was never any pig based foods that we ate. It just wasn't allowed. And up to now, I don't eat pork. It started off as a religious thing for me, but the reasons that the religion gave me for not eating pork, when you question it, you think, oh, you haven't quite got that right, because it was tradition. You don't eat pork. In them days, there wasn't many fridges about. So when you run on this pig and you kill the pig, and you've got to get it cooked and ate. You can't leave it. But nowadays, you can actually deep freeze. You can leave things in the freezers for a little time before you eat. But yet, and in fact, as I left the church myself, age 16, I must have ate about 200 pigs. I'm making up for it because of my stubbornness. And then after a time, I'm thinking to myself, well, why are you eating so much pork? It's because you're told not to, and you wasn't given a good reason for not having it. You know what I mean? But now my choice is I don't want it. And as you look around, you look at different religions, different people, when they're starting to cut back on the sort of foods that they eat. I think one of the first things is red meat and pork. They tend to not drop that quite quickly on. Yeah. Mm.
Interesting. So, what do you miss? I know you left when you were 4, but what do you miss most about Carriacou?
Carriacou for me still remains my home. When I go to Carriacou, I remember I was with Auntie Iris with your mum, and we look out the window. I saw this lad walking up. He said, he's got he had Ellis's way. As I'm looking, I'm thinking that that's Ellis. So no, Ellis is back in the. And your grandma started laughing. He's your cousin. He's my father's brother's son. It was, but you see the Cujo, you see the Calder, you see the Cox, and everything. That's mine. That's mine. Mhm.
That's nice. So, when do you feel closest to it now?
I the decision to this is going to answer one of the questions that you was going to ask. The decision to avoid the talk about all this Ladja Bless and all that sort of stuff. My old man had considered that that was a sort of rum talk. Is when people get together and they drink the old rum and they start talking a load of rubbish. And for that, he was SDA, anti-drink. So we avoided a lot of this stuff. We'd hear stories about Sequoia and this, that, the next, but the old man had made it sound like it was just ridiculous. Just read your Bible. The Bible will tell you something different, like, you know what I mean? So we avoided all that sort of stuff, which I guess I'm quite pleased about because some horror stories out there, really, isn't it? When you follow it, like you're frightened you'd be frightened to leave your house. You know what I mean? Hmm. Hmm.
So, is there something about Carriacou you carry with you every day?
In everything that I do, my first thing is I am a kayak. And I say that with a great deal of pride, even when I'm amongst the guys that I grew up with. A lot of them in the church were Jamaicans. I got to love reggae music and R&B music, but a lot of them I'd say I'm Carlyle Kayak, because one of the things there was some friction back in the '60s when we were here with the islands, and from time to time somebody's talking to my mother and they'd say, "Mrs. Carlyle, is a small island," and she turns and says, "Well, yes, I'm small enough. We're small enough to care." We we found that there was a lot of friction amongst them. And so she would say, yes, small enough to care. And on my last trip, I was talking to your mom about in Caribbean, I learned that there's only 9,000 people in Carriacou. The whole of Grenada, the spread is, was it 22,000 or something like that? And there's only 9,000 people in Carriacou. But Carriacou for me is my world. It is my world. And the issue was some years ago, there was a Tory leader from the UK that was looking for a spot to build a summer home, and he stumbled across. I don't know how true it is. It could be one of these stories again, but he stumbled across a certain section of Meldrum, and he was doing some inquiries as to how he can get to buy this land. As it happens, the land belonged to my mother. And when she was approached about it, she said, "Well, I didn't buy it. I'm not selling it. and you don't know what the future holds. That meant absolutely nothing at all when she said it. But if you follow the world now, and I'm not even going to mention his name, but you follow the way that the world is going now, you kind of think, well, that really is my home. That is where I belong. So I have no intention of, I will keep it for as long as I can keep it. But then you have children, and we're getting on now. We're wrong side of 70, we're getting on now. And whether the kids will keep it going, I don't know. I'm hoping so. But that is my home. This isn't.
So, what did your parents or grandparents teach you about Carriacou?
Carriacou, the the I don't know whether it is that the area of West Africa where we originated, the people appear to be quite humble and grounded, and I could see that in my mother. She was a very humble, deep Christian, and a lot of people wouldn't be able to figure her out. She was never angry, but very thoughtful. And from time to time, when she would call me up and she wants to have a word, and it's deep, but it's secret, you know? That's nice.
What should the next generation, what do they need to understand about Carriacou?
Um, the pride, the Carricou's pride, we're a very proud people. There's not many of us when you consider the population of the world, but we're a very proud people. What I was led to understand was that back in the day when I was a youngster, even the elders tried to keep Carriacou with Carriacou. I could say I have an issue with that really, because I think it's the right thing for people to travel and meet people of different cultures and get their heads together to sort things out. But it's Carriacou with Carriacou. This is our people. This is where we're going. This is what it's all about. I visited Grenada the other day, and I'm thinking, oh, they've kept a lot of, they've stepped up. Grenada I found it really, really, there was a great deal of pride involved. I'm thinking Grenada, they're at the top one, because some of the islands are still quite third world. And if you get accustomed to the way that we live in Britain, we want to have the modern stuff going on, but you're going back to your roots. You're going back to your roots, but they've managed to step up. So it's nice. It's a beautiful place. The people, to me, they remain the humble people. And although when they're ready, when they lose that humility and they start to bare their teeth, you have to be careful. But the humility, I love it. One of my pet hates is this sort of showy offy people that you get from different areas of the world. For whatever reason, they become very, and it really gets on my nerve. It drives me absolutely crazy. I like the humility, but from time to time, you really have to roar so that people need to know that you're a lion. I can, but I choose not to. I choose a peaceful way. You know what I'm saying? I inherited that.
Can you tell me a bit more about what life was like when you got to Birmingham? What was Birmingham like? Can you remember?
Well, we're trying to fit in. I think it was the same then as it is now, in that you have the government of the country that thinks that that is the way forward. But the locals, not so. When my father came across to this land of milk and honey, and this is going to be this and that, and then some of the local people, some of them, I've got to be careful how I say this, but sometimes you're described as trashy people, and because they have the whatever it is that fits into this country, they got the white skin and whatever, they think somehow they're a better person than you. And you think, well, look at that, how strange life is. My father was disappointed when he came to the UK. He looked forward to it, coming for 2 years and sending money back to the Caribbean. But he was disappointed with the reactions, coupled with the fact that we were staunch Seventh day Adventists. So even at in the winter months when sun sets early, it gets dark early, we would have to come home from school before closing time of school so we could welcome the Sabbath as a family together. And we couldn't do anything, no cooking, no cleaning, no anything on the Sabbath. If you know anything about Seventh Adventists, they couldn't do anything. So that is a strange thing for these people. So in a strange sort of way, you feel like you're just a little different to a lot of them. The education, mum, well, you will call you the Coxes. Education is the way forward. They're pushing that, pushing education, learn. Fantastic, fantastic.
Mm-hmm. So so you came over when you were 4. So
I
what
came
was school like then?
school. I remember an incident at school where because we had we're not allowed to eat pork, for instance, and we'd be having school dinners, and most of it is pork in one form, whether it's bacon or something like that. I can't have that. So we end up probably having a tomato. You know what I'm saying? And the other kids would be saying, well, where did I have some chips and a tomato? Well, you get some meat. And no, we don't eat that. So in many ways, it was just strange to people the way that they knew nothing about Seventh Adventist religion, but yet as you go about, it's all over the world. It's everywhere. Everywhere I go, I'm seeing Seventh Adventist, this, that, and the next. I don't go anymore, by the way, because there's another side to all that. Because even within the church itself, what we found was we found that there's a lot of competitions going on. I can wear nicer clothes than you. I can do this, that. I think, well, no, not in the church, for God's sakes. So I turned my back on that probably 50 years ago. But I still go from time to time because that's where my family comes from. That's where my family's roots originates.
Right. So were there many people from Carriacou here at the same time as you, your family?
Here's the thing, the old man, you will hear the talk. Yeah, you can't get a drink at Mr. Calder's. Alcohol, no. He's not having alcohol in his house. And he did right up to the end. Even as a sick man, he ain't going to have it. And while he was sick and that, and he'd get all the Carriacou people coming and visiting him. Then they'd have the go down, they'll come and visit, and then they'll go down the local pub, the Farcraft pub in Rookery Road. They go down and have a couple of beers because they can't have a drink at Mr. Carlyle's because he's a Seventh Adventist, blah, 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 blah. But he stuck to his guns. He believed in what he believed in. And this is where all this talk about the sequoia and all this sort of thing, he reckons that's where it originated, with guys having nothing to do other than sit down and drink rum and this, that, the next, and they come up with all these crazy stories. And you must have experienced it sometimes because I had a very good friend who had a pub in the Midlands, and you get a lot of guys up there and they sit on the old Carriacou talk. It tells stories. The stories are nice. The stories are nice, but whether they're true, I don't know. I don't think so. Well, some of them.
So what stories have you heard?
You have I don't know if you hear about the sequoia, with a man with a horse and the horse's legs, and they come, and if you go out late at night, they will follow you and they'll do this and something will befall you. One of the things that my father did used to do as a when we were young, from time to time, if he felt that somebody wasn't telling the whole truth, he'd have this glass of holy water. And he will say, well, we're out in such and such, such. And if you drink that water, something is going to befall you. I think it comes from that same sort of loop. It's just a different angle to get people to tell the truth however they can. And with we avoided, although we had family, a lot of the family was involved in carnival and all this sort of stuff, but the teachings kept us away from this sort of thing. And I always remember being absolutely frightened to bits when they used to put on the tar, the molasses, when they jab jab, when they come up with jab jab, I used to run the house and try and hide under the bed so nobody could find me. And that would have been before age 4. That would have been before age 4. But now I was talking to one of my nephews at one stage a few years ago, and the carnival in Carriacou is the February, and he's then out there, and I'm picking up pictures of him with molasses. Having a great time. Having a great time, just totally oblivious to what used to scare us as kids, like, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Oh wow. So I know you mentioned obviously your family staunch Seventh
Yeah,
Day and not interested in any of that.
yeah.
But what were you not allowed to do as a child?
Um, Runabouts on the streets.
Mm.
You're never to be. They'd never leave us out in the streets. In fact, even nowadays, you know, when I'm out and about, and I see some little kid running down the street on its own, and I have to stop in my tracks and think, well, where's the parents who couldn't do that? When we went into the banks and places like that, we have to keep quiet. We can't run about, and like a lot of people do, you go in the banks and you see these kids and they're behaving bad. We weren't allowed to do that. We had to behave ourselves, and it wasn't a case of mom shouting at us or anything like that. It's just a look. She'd turn around and she'd look, sit down quiet, behave yourself. Behave yourself. I got some business I got to sort out here. And you need to be quiet without saying it. So a lot of the things that you come across, the way that a lot of the children behave, I think it's all social media and all this sort of stuff has added to all that stuff. But it was restrained. It was restrained for us. So the freedom to let go was never, as a young boy, it wasn't there. And the thing about it is the work that I did in the fire service, we were always there when something went wrong. And from time to time, we're called out to somebody's having a party. They've got one of those bouncy castles and blah, blah, blah. And everybody's killed themselves laughing. And then all of a sudden, something goes wrong. And then we get called out to it. So, what that did to me was to, I think, if I look in the mirror and work out where I got it slightly wrong, I was very protective of mine. Whenever we went out, we were having a good time. I'm thinking, what can go wrong? What can go wrong? Instead of going, have a good time, and we'll talk about it later. I was very careful that they were comfortable and safe. And it's probably put, long term, it's probably put them a little on edge because they probably wanted to go out and um, do something crazy. They might well have hurt themselves for real. But with the experience that I had, are you following me? The experience I had, we always turned up to assist when something went wrong. And that kind of made me on edge with my family. You know what I mean? Okay.
tell me a bit more about food. So I know you mentioned you like cuckoo, but who taught you to cook?
Well, Mum used to insist that not just the girls, but the boys need to learn to hold their own while they're in the kitchen. And she used to cook some um, pea soup. We used to call it Brad Duff with the broad dumplings. And I loved up to today. I still love pea soup and dumpling, the chicken, the fish, the lamb. We had all of that. I know later on, as Mum was getting a little older, she decided to pack up red meat, and they'd introduced all these grannies foods and all that sort of stuff. But dinner time was always a nice time for us. In fact, I noticed years ago, and I think I was still at junior school at the time. There was a family that lived across the way from us, and for some reason, they always turn up just about dinner time. Not that they had a spoon in their pocket or anything like that, but they'd always turn up when they know that we're gonna sit and have something to eat. They always turn up. And Mum would always share. She was always into sharing. So the one lad he probably spent a bit too much time at our house, to be fair. But he always went out with his stomach full and his big smile in his face until the next meal time.
So as a family, did you have a lot of celebrations coming together?
No, they weren't into, if you understand the Seventh Adventists, they're not into partying and dancing and drinking. We had none of that. We had none of that. And in fact, a relative of yours, some years ago, used to run a function every year where there's a black tie, black firefighters function. And he came down with his wife at one stage. He came down with his wife at one stage, and mhm. and I was demonstrating some salsa dancing. And he kind of looked at me after. He says, "Well, your father must turn in his grave when he see you dancing," because they know we just wasn't allowed to go out dancing and drinking and enjoying ourselves that way, which is something that I think was wrong. Yeah, I think it was wrong. I mean, nobody gets it 100% right, do they? They did their best. They did the very best that they could. But I encourage mine to get out there and dance until like nobody's watching. Just enjoy your music. Careful with the drinking. You have to be careful with the drinking. Just go and enjoy yourself. Hmm.
So, um, what would you want someone visiting Carriacou to experience?
I would like whoever visits Carriacou, if it's an outsider especially, for them to get to know what Carriacou people are, because sometimes you can be fooled by their humility. They're gentle. They're a gentle people, but gentleness is not a weakness. The, I say to my boys, practice humility. But from time to time, when somebody is there and probably taking the mick, go over the top, sort it out, and get back to humility again. Don't mess. I've got you. I know where you're going with this. Don't try it with me. Yeah? And that is a lesson I hope that my boys will pass on to their boys and girls, their children generally. But it's deep, they're traditional, they're fun loving, and a lot of the time you listen carefully, and they've got quite a humor about them as well. If you just listen carefully and follow what they're doing and what they're saying. But lunchtime, eating, TV off, conversation, everybody sit down together and enjoy that period. Enjoy it. It's what family life is all about. Mm.
Just going back to your parents when they came here,
Mm-hmm.
Did they ever want to go back to Carriacou?
They always wanted to go back to Carriacou because the when my father came here, like I said before, he came for a couple of years and he was just going to work here, send the money back to Carriacou, and then go back to Carriacou and pick up where he left off and carry on. But what had happened was when my father came, he was quite disappointed with the way things were. And then that is when your grandmother, John Rosie died just after mom, your great grandmother. She died when my dad came here and left us in Carriacou. Um, our grandmother died then, great grandmother died then. And so things had to be altered. So then the old man is saying to mom, well, come and then we'll send for the children and we'll do what we got to do as a unit, which I thought was quite good.
Do you remember the first meal you ate when you went back to Carriacou after leaving England, after living in England? What was the first meal?
When was my first real visit back to Carriacou? 1980. 1980. We came 61, 62. I went back in 1980. The first meal I had, now I can't really remember. I can't really remember. There's a chap, a Welsh chap that I took back to the Caribbean with me, and he absolutely loved it. He loved it. It's a story I can tell as well because my father just died, and there's business to be sorted out in the Caribbean. So I've applied in my fire service work for special leave because I've got to go about my father's business. And this guy, Welsh guy that I got on particularly well with, he's come sheepishly, is it all right if I come with you? So I'm saying, well, I've had to jump through hoops to get the leave in the first place. Unpaid leave as well it was, because he had me leave and then extended leave on top of that. So for him to get it without good reason, because his reason would have been my mate's coming back to the Caribbean to visit his family. And if you can get it, come with us, let's go. And he got it. And he's down in the Caribbean, where we were staying. A friend of my mother's was doing some cooking at the time, and she had rung me while I was still here to find out if this friend of mine had any problems with any sort of foods. And the one thing he says to me was, oh, I don't like mangoes. So I then responded by telling this woman that Peter says he doesn't like mangoes. Anyway, she carried on talking. She just it appeared that she just ignored what I said. Because when we got down to Grenada before we went to Carriacou, there's a feast waiting for us when they're down there. Everything. And she's got about 6 or 7 different mango trees in her garden, as well as other fruits. And she's prepared this feast, and she's saying, well, she's got a bowl full of different fruits. And she says, well, when you finish eating, have a fruit and blah, blah, blah. And Peter ate like he'd never ate before. And then he's seen this yellow and red mango at the top of the fruit. I think she did that deliberately, actually. Put this red and yellow, big mango. I forget the type of mango they call it. And Peter decided he was going to have this mango. So he took it and peeled it, and he bit into this mango, and the juices started running down his hands. And in front of the crowd that we were with, he sticks his tongue out. And this woman looks at me and she goes, you kind of point with your mouth. And then after everything had calmed down and that, she says, Carlyle, when I spoke to you, you said Peter says he doesn't like mangoes. She says, I heard you, but she says, Peter, she says, how many different types of mangoes are there? And he said, I don't know, is it 5 or 6? She says, no, no. She says, there's hundreds of different types of mangoes. So when Carl told me he didn't like mangoes, I'm thinking, I don't know anybody in this world that doesn't like a particular mango. But I tell you what, this chap retired before me. I retired in 2008. He retired about 2006. And I have no doubt that if I was to go and find him now, he's got a bag with a mango in. But he don't like mangoes. Yeah, yes, yes. That was back in 1980.
So, is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to talk about Carriacou, about your memories? Is there anything jump out that I haven't that you want to share?
I can't think of anything else because I think you've covered a lot of the questions. You've even avoided asking about these Lava Bless, Ladja Bless. I guess it's because of the way that I says that the old man's SDA, so he kept us away from that sort of thing in the first place. A lot of these stories, these wild stories, as kids, it would scare you, wouldn't it? I mean, I listen to some of my Jamaican friends sometimes, and they talk about Brenancy stories and all this sort of stuff. But it was entertainment for them. But some of them went down the same route, so I think it's all coming from the same place. I don't know whether it's West Africa or wherever it is. Tell the kids this, that, the next, and that will keep them in line. I don't know if that was the thinking behind it, but and interesting listening to the talk. But like I said, my old man's conclusion is a lot of that was born through them old boys and they're drinking their rum and having a little chat.
So, what were you told? If you saw something at night?
If I saw something at night, there was nothing to be scared of, because the truth is, the old man would say something like, the truth is, sometimes people say to me, why, when you're walking out in the dark, you're not frightened? He says, well, it's not me that needs to be frightened. It's the people that need to be frightened because they'll be in for a surprise. If somebody in the dark, because it's going to be dark for them as well, decide they're going to jump out and try and scare me, well, they're in for a problem. They're in for a problem because I don't scare. I don't scare. So really, they'll have to suffer the consequences, whatever that is. You know what I'm saying? Mm, mm.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.